Hello, welcome to this tutorial. We're basically going to be going over how to use loop MIDI along with MIDI aux to use multiple different applications with one singular MIDI controller. It's actually very simple. As soon as you install MIDI aux and loop MIDI, what you're going to want to do is go into loop MIDI first, and you simply create a new port name, label it whatever you want. In this instance, I have VoiceMeter MIDI and CoyoteMIDI. You can add, remove, and mute these channels. So if you needed to mute something for a period of time, you can go ahead and do that and then unmute rather than deleting and going through. Very handy, very useful. Along with that, MIDI aux is very simple. All you're going to need to do is go into Options under MIDI Devices. You should see your two new MIDI sources in your input and outputs. Now, to properly set this up, you would want to change the MIDI input to whatever MIDI you're using. You could also use this as multiple MIDIs. So for example, you have this one right here. You could also have like 5 others and then do a combination of whatever you feel like. Then we go over into MIDI outputs and we select our sources we made. So we have VoiceMeter MIDI and CoyoteMIDI. Now I do have this going back into its own MIDI output. However, I don't think that's really doing anything for me. I haven't found a use case for it, but you could probably figure it out better than me. So once you do that, I'd actually recommend going up here and name this as a preset. You click this button here to save that, and so every time you relaunch this or need to go into this at a later time, you can simply hit a drop down, go into this file, and it should have all of these saved. So once we get out of this, you'll obviously see that it has reinitialized. So now we can go ahead and go into our applications. So up here we have VoiceMeter to start. If I go over into MIDI mapping, we see our MIDI input devices, and this should show all of our 3 drop-downs. We have our main MIDI, of course, the physical MIDI, and then our 2 virtual MIDIs. I'm going to be using the VoiceMeter MIDI in this case, so we can have it separated out. And over here in CoyoteMIDI, we have our MIDI channel selected as CoyoteMIDI. Now this is from a previous test. Obviously we don't have this, but if we were to go into here and label this port 1, and let's refresh. I think we'd have to refresh this entire application. Let's just do it real quick as a test. So we go ahead and relaunch CoyoteMIDI. And as soon as that is relaunched, we should be able to go back in and see that new port we created. And obviously, since the other one was deleted, it will refresh that as well. Now, for an application like this, if let's say I had this selected and then we deleted this port, this actually would show up gray because it's recognizing as a device that's basically not plugged in, even though it's a virtual port that we have created and deleted. So if we delete this and we go ahead and leave just that one checked, if we relaunch this again, it'll be simply grayed out. So let's just do that real quick. So we pretty much go back in here and like I said, it's grayed out. Now this one won't show, so we just uncheck that and it's gone. So for CoyoteMIDI, this is basically taking my MIDI. By the way, the whole reason I'm doing this is so I can control not only my audio sources through VoiceMeter Potato, I would also like to use my MIDI as pretty much a macro keyboard. So in this case, I'm using F sharp, G sharp, A sharp for controlling my OBS scenes. Now, this is just an example here, but later down the line, this is probably going to be like every single key on the keyboard doing some random thing. So for a quick demonstration, if I go over into MIDI mapping, this light right here should show, as well as these will glow when I'm hitting these buttons. So right now I'm on my singular physical MIDI, and I can now switch to a blank scene and back to my main scene. So for a quick example, we can go in here and test out our scenes. So me pressing scene 1 is obviously the same scene here, but you'll notice we have scene 1 popping up as well as our VoiceMeter MIDI. That is because obviously both of them are basically combined. So I wouldn't recommend using one button to overlap certain settings. However, that may actually work for you in some cases. But for me, I'm basically using sliders to control in and outputs. So for this stream output, I have set to this control right here, and then my actual buttons are the ones transferring scenes. So I hope this helped. Quick, easy tutorial, and have a good one.